make you an effective mentor?
Spirit.
Experience.
Spirit.
Experience.
Sense of humor.
Good listener.
Sit down.
Good listener.
The ability to investigate with questions and probe.
Ability to learn.
Calm.
Sorry?
Calm. Caring. Never.
Love of teaching, exuding that sharing that love of teaching, that excitement about teaching. And you're a role model for that, for sure. For sure. Okay. Oh, there's a love of learning. So the research indicates that there are 8 qualities of characteristics of good mentors. They love learning. They love to learn. Their desire to give, to share. Rabbi Gross says he's not getting paid enough. Yeah, that's why he's here. Despite that, he's here.
That's right.
Willing to share, not dominate the conversation. Commit time. Don't expect the mentor, the protege to change overnight. Let them take risks. Listener. And this is all premised on there's a whole literature on adult learning that you're not working with a child, you're working with an adult, and there's a difference. There's a lot of similarities, okay? The differences. So you should be familiar with the adult learning theory. So there's some slides on here that I just want to just not go over now, but rather just to indicate that you may want to look more at maybe Google Scholar or Google the notion of adult learning, and there's some principles that are explicated in more detail there. So there are 4 phases of mentoring: preparing, which is what you're doing now, okay? Negotiating, enabling, and enclosure. So let's go over them very quickly. So examine your motivations. I presume you've done that before you came here, but also you may go through this. We've not had this yet, but it's possible someone after they leave here will say, something? It's not for me. Mentoring is not for me. And I would say to you, thank you, telling us now rather than later. What you're getting into. Mentoring could be messy. It's not so glorious. It's difficult work, time-consuming work, but so rewarding. But that's your decision. What do you bring to the table? What are your time commitments? What do you expect from the protege? I think that's in one of the initial conversations. Asking the protege, what do you expect from me? Making sure the expectations are the same. And then tell them, protege, what I expect from you. Be on time, to we have a meeting, to be there, and so forth and so on. And sometimes, I think those should be articulated. Sometimes they're implied or implicit, and there's lack of communication. There was a problem last year in a good relationship where they started off in a very bad way, okay? But so I suggested they really sit and talk about expectations, actually write them down. It helped tremendously. Okay.
Can I ask
Please.
you about the time commitment?
Yes.
I think the beginning of the year takes a tremendous amount of time in getting them prepared and comfortable in the classroom. Even just setting up the classroom and discussing with them how they envision their classroom, even what the physical, expectations are really important. And later on, I think we can stick to that hour and a half.
Right, very good.
Commitment. But I think the beginning of the year, setting the stage and making them feel comfortable requires a lot of time.
Your protege's got a book, which is another one of my top 10 books after Chaim Ganat's Teacher of Child. Harry Wong's First Days of School. You can never redo the first day.
Right.
So I might pick up on what Michal said. That is, those first times you have with the protege are so important. And there might be time consuming and more time than usual. And and you can never go back on that. So that's why that those initial times you have together, whether it's from email or phone conversations or it's in person, are so critical.
Clearly that's true, and you have to spend time at the beginning, but maybe you'll be getting to this at some point, but you mentioned the idea of setting goals. Am I correct in assuming that you don't set goals at the beginning because you have to observe the teacher and you have to see what the teacher's all about is going in the classroom before you can define those goals?
Right. So tomorrow we're going to have some time for you to have conversations with your protege about the plan to set goals. But I think I agree with you. It's premature right now. I don't know if they have all their placements yet. What, do they have their placements in your schools? So some cases yes, some cases no. So really, it's premature. But this is about relationship building, getting to know them, and talking about planning for them. But you're right. It's not the time to set goals right now.
Right. I mean, if I can, I know what some people did last year in terms of the summer, even before the school starts. One of the goals could be to help acculturate them to the culture of the school. You want to bring them up to speed in terms of, my goal is that my protege is going to know exactly who the school librarian is, what materials they need to have in before the beginning of the year, things that you might not know unless you have been teaching at that school for a while. You're obviously speaking more to pedagogy, but in terms of, they're new to teaching. It's a new life experience.
Even ordering supplies.
Or all those things make such a difference. Yes. Yeah. If you guys have ideas, I think it's a great thing to share with each
I
other.
have another question. If we do extras, like I do 8th grade fundraising and things like that, are we to include our proteges? Is that too much to add to their world? Is it the kind of thing that we say, gee, are you interested, or do you just want to sit idly by, or is that up to the school or up to the protege?
I would invite them.
I like,
them
gee,
and be
are you
respectful
interested?
Of, they may want to. They want to please you and say yes, but they might
I
not
don't
be
want to
ready.
overwhelm them.
So right, you'll have to make that call. I think.
Mhm.
Okay.
That's part of the trust.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
But it can be something. It's just not that they're just supposed
That's
to
right.
teach.
That's right. That's right. And goal setting, sharing your vision with them, developing a growth plan, an action plan. Not now, but somewhere maybe after the first couple of months, or weeks, and interim goals. Some degree, okay, and having that plan is, and maybe the proteges and mentors from last year can share their goals with you. That might be helpful. We'll try to facilitate that. Okay, enablers implementing them. We talked about being a good listener, giving honest feedback, analyzing. This afternoon, we'll be learning about communication skills and feedback, and a lot of time this afternoon and tomorrow will be spent on that. Okay? Good. Mentoring is not. Anybody got a problem with that?
Sometimes it's a little counseling and therapy.
Yeah.
If they have a hard day and
It is. But my point is that you're not professionally a psychologist. But you're right. There's obviously this counseling to it. Yeah.
So that means if you notice that the protege overreacts. Just an example I had from a student. You notice the protege overreacts, and you all of a sudden in a conversation it comes up that, oh, my dad blew his top every time he had an issue. All of a sudden you look at this protege and say, oh, so what do you do now? You maybe stay hands off, or try and make sure that you don't talk about it in those terms?
I don't know what it means about his father and his. I wouldn't know where to go with that. But I wouldn't go in that direction. I would talk about what he's doing in the classroom and have conversations about what he's doing in the classroom. Not go to the source.
And you said he does. You didn't ask the question, but it came up in conversation. Sometimes people say things. So don't go that way. Keep it to the classroom.
What do you say? Any ideas?
To be very specific on the behaviors that you're seeing. If you start going out there, it's very dangerous. Again, I would stay away. And if you feel like you need to tell someone, then go tell your principal that you're seeing.
Well, I don't mean to say that the person is being terribly abusive. I don't mean to say that. I just meant to say that what happens if the person opens up to you, and all of a sudden, in the course of the conversation, it comes up that
Be a listener. Be a listener. I don't know if you what do you, Peggy, Shirley, do you have any?
Back to the classroom.
keep it going.
Also might be helpful, as Dr. Glantz mentioned, to channel the person to the right resources. There are people there to support that need, and one of the jobs that we do in working with proteges is help them connect with the right people. And there's somebody, that you're going to try to help them connect with through talking, not telling, as Dr. Glantz said, and help them go in the right direction. Because,
Good.
What do you mean by the last point? It's not loosely structured. What do you mean by that?
Meaning, there's defined times to meet.
Uh-huh.
That's what I meant. It's set times.
Mm-hmm.
We can't say that mentoring is not evaluated. I understand it's not evaluated in terms of we're not evaluating them whether good teachers and not good teachers, or like we said before, to determine whether cut out for teaching or not. But if you're talking about a plan and monitoring progress, you're by definition evaluating how they're doing regarding the goals that you set, and that's an evaluative
So
piece.
and you, in your interactions with that protege, you set goals and you talk about those goals, whether they met or not. So technically, yes, but I meant school-wide. Your job is not to whether to fire them or
To make
retain
sure we
them.
understand what
The
that
supervisor
whole
does that.
meaning is.
Or the formal evaluative process. The person says to me, do me a favor. Do me a favor. I'm busy today. Can you do the you know, there's an evaluation process in school, once in the fall, once in the spring. Evaluate him for me. You should say no. First of all, he shouldn't ask you to do that if he's in his program. You should say no. But somehow, you know, I'm not okay with the you know, I'm too closely involved in the process. Okay. So let me just quickly, there's some quotes here that you could read. And keeping in mind, now there's there. You mentioned this, the different roles you may play. Okay. And where we've asked, proteges didn't see this. They saw this part though. They saw this light. They didn't see all that preceding this. They saw, you know, they're wondering how they're going to be evaluated. They're wondering about what it's like to be in a school, you know, and the way in which you can help them with that. And we're going to share with supervisors, we share this with them, what we expect of them. We also talk up. So they're going to evaluate you. In the last tab, in the hand that I gave you, is an evaluation form. So you should look at the criteria the program may use to evaluate you. And it's done anonymously. We aggregate the data so that we don't really identify. We've not had a problem where we've had to remove a mentor. We're dealing with good people here, and so never an issue. But it's just feedback. It's a feedback mechanism for you. So you should be clear on what are the questions we might ask your protege about the mentoring relationship. It's not just about the mentor, it's about the school, the support they receive from the principal, and so forth.
Will we see their evaluation?
So you see aggregate data. Do they see? I saw they evaluated me, and I didn't know. Do I know who they were? I think it was just aggregate. And from all the places, I got responses. Did I do that? Or have we done that yet for the first year?
Will we share the mentors, the supervisor evaluation of the mentors with the mentor? I think we'll use our judgment in terms of what feedback we feel would be helpful to you. In terms of everything that we ask them is not necessarily information you care to know. We'll try to make it as a one-pager as possible. And I'm sure, like the supervisor, part of their role is to have that follow-up conversation. Once they get these forms, they're like, oh, I should be thinking about this, doing that, and that should lead to a conversation between the supervisor and the mentor about the mentoring relationship, how things are going.
When I visit the site, and I visit the
Exactly.
site, and Karen has site she visits, we look at that piece, how it's going.
Exactly.
You know, we support you, we support the protege, we support the principal, the supervisor, and the relationship and the whole program. That's our responsibility. Okay? Okay, so, and then we're going to tell the supervisors this. So I want you to know what we're going to speak to the supervisors, and we have a webinar with them next week, I believe. Okay? And in order for this to be successful, they must commit. And it's going to be my responsibility. If I think one way I need to improve myself, based on the last year's experience, was that while I was in touch with the principals, I sometimes gave them too much credit, and I stayed back And I think this time I'm going to have a much more hands-on approach to make sure that, while it began nicely in September and October, I kind of like was away for November and December, and then I found out by January and February they weren't meeting as regularly as they should, meaning the protege and the mentor, until I had to speak to the supervisor, and then it was back on track again. Because things happen naturally in the school, and so I understand that, and well, I didn't understand that quite well last year, but this year that's one way I'm going to change my interaction with the school. Okay? Anybody know the rule of 6, by the way? The rule of 6? There are various spins on this, but start by telling them 6 good things about what you saw. You know, always with a positive. 6, giving them that, being very encouraging, building their confidence. Yeah. Well, however, with that said, I don't think a post-conference, or what I call a feedback conference, should be you telling them what was good. Most of the time. I think it should be a conversation about pedagogy. And rather than labeling as disabling. So if I tell them the lesson was good, they don't want to know, right, was it a good lesson? Was it a good lesson? How did I do? I'm going to throw it back at them. How do you
The supervisor or the mentor?
Now that could be frustrating to a protege who wants an answer. And sometimes they don't easy answers. But you have to be very sensitive. Sometimes they'll need an encouraging word, but ultimately you want to engage them so they begin to reflect about their own teaching practice, and then help them define what was good and not so good. Okay? So, with that said, and that's what we're going to share with the mentors, and we're going to develop a map or a plan for you, as well as the proteges, as well as with the supervisors. Any questions?
I just a little confused before because you had supervisors.